They say the Vatican has no executioners, that God forgives and the Church saves. But buried beneath Castel Gandolfo was a chamber where God never entered, and that's where they made him. He was 7 when his parents died, not in war, not by illness, but drowned in a baptismal font inside St. Paul's Basilica. His parents were caught stealing relics from a locked archive, a place ordinary priests weren't allowed to know existed. 2 small objects wrapped in linen. No one ever said what they were. When the guards found them, there was no trial, just water and force. The boy screamed until his voice broke as he watched his parents. They told him mercy was the reason they saved him, so he could pray for their souls. Then they took him away. The boy was brought to a room that didn't appear on any Vatican plan. Cold air, wet stone, no windows, only walls carved with Latin names that had been scratched out. Masks hung from hooks. Blades glimmered in the candlelight. The guards called the place Canticum Umbrae, the shadow choir. There were other children there once, but he never heard them speak. Silence was rule, punishment, and prayer. When he cried, they said it was the devil leaving him. When he stopped, they said he was finally pure. They did not teach him scripture. They taught him the body, how pain travels through muscle, how to cut where the scream dies first, how to watch without feeling. At night, he lay on the cold floor listening to footsteps above, priests walking to vespers, bells echoing through marble. He wondered if God could hear anything from this far down. One instructor knelt beside him once and whispered, "You were spared for a reason. Mercy is not kindness, it's purpose." The boy believed him, and in that belief, the Church found what it wanted most, a child who would never question an order. By 12, he no longer prayed. The words meant nothing when every mercy he'd known came with pain. They broke his hands, deliberately, once for failure, twice for hesitation, then again and again until the bones healed around the lesson. Each time they set them wrong so his grip would never shake. When it was over, his fingers fit perfectly around Vatican steel. He never cried, not after the 3rd break. Pain became the only language he understood, and he spoke it fluently. They began calling him Apostolus Feri, the Apostle of Iron. They said God had reforged him, but the truth was simpler. They had destroyed the boy and left only the weapon. His days were silent drills inside the stone chambers of Canticum Umbrae, reading anatomy charts by candlelight, reciting Latin while dissecting what the priests called lessons of the flesh. He learned where the voice ends, how quickly faith collapses when the lungs fill with blood. Between lessons, he was marched to the chapel above. There the instructors read the litany of obedience. Through silence I am pure. Through command I am free. He whispered it with the others until it stopped sounding like words. At night, he dreamt of water again, the same font where his parents had died. Only now he was the one holding them down. When the masters decided he was ready, they gave him robes, black without crucifix or collar. No mark of priesthood, only purpose. A single ring was pressed into his hand, silver, cold, engraved with one word, Obedir, obey. They told him the ring was blessed, that it bound him to heaven's will. He didn't believe them, but he wore it anyway. He had nothing else that proved he existed. His first assignment came without ceremony, a monk accused of translating forbidden texts into Greek. He entered the cell, closed the door, and when he opened it again, there was no sound, no struggle, only stillness. After that, no one called him by name again. He was simply the hand that carried out mercy. And mercy, in Rome, always left a body behind. He executed 71 people before his 21st birthday. There were no trials, no witnesses. only letters sealed in red wax and stamped with the papal crest. Each one carried a name, a place, and the word purify. He never saw the men who wrote them. He only saw their shadows on the chapel walls when they passed by the candles. The first was a scholar who claimed the stars moved by reason, not grace. The second, a woman who said she'd seen angels too bright for heaven. The third, a bishop whose confession didn't match the church's calendar of sins. Each death was quiet, precise. He made no spectacle, no blood. He learned where to cut so the heart stopped before the scream began. When it was done, he knelt beside every body, pressed a finger to the lips, and whispered, "Be still. You're forgiven." He told himself it was mercy, but mercy had started to sound like fear. He began keeping the rosaries of the condemned. At first by accident, later by choice. Hidden in the lining of his robes, they clicked together when he walked. He counted them as he used to count his own heartbeats, a rhythm he could no longer hear. Sometimes, late at night, the air in his cell felt heavier, like someone else was breathing beside him. He'd wake to the faint smell of oil and incense, and the sound of a choir humming from behind the walls. Voices he recognized, though every one of them should have been dead. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He told himself the whispers were echoes of the church bells, but the bells didn't call his name. When he looked into the polished metal of his blade, he began to see faces, not reflections, but memories. Mouths moving silently, eyes wide as if mid-prayer. He asked his confessor what it meant. The man replied, "Every saint begins as a sinner who learned to obey." The executioner nodded. Then, the next morning, he executed the confessor too. He did not remember why, only that the order was sealed in red wax, and that the letter carried no name at all. After that, he stopped asking questions, until the night he was assigned the blind priest. He found the blind priest inside a stone cell below St. John Lateran. No guards, no chains. Just a man sitting quietly with his hands folded, as though he'd been waiting for someone. When the executioner entered, the priest turned his head slightly, smiling as if he could see right through the mask. "You're not the first they've sent," he said softly, "but you'll be the last who listens." His voice was calm, not defiant, not afraid. Calm, like someone who'd already spoken his last words many times before. The executioner said nothing. He drew the blade from his belt and waited for the priest to pray. But the old man didn't pray. He lifted his chin and said, "There are two gods in Rome. The one they preach about, and the one who weeps for the ones they erase." The executioner hesitated. He wasn't sure why. He'd heard every kind of heresy before, but this sounded less like rebellion and more like truth. The priest continued, "They told you obedience is faith, but faith without choice is just silence, and silence is their God, not yours." For the first time in his life, the executioner spoke without being asked to. "What is his name?" he said. The priest leaned forward until his face was inches from the blade. "You already know it," he whispered. The chamber felt smaller after that. The air thickened, the candles bent toward the priest like they were listening, and beneath the silence came a sound. A heartbeat that wasn't his. The executioner lowered the blade. He couldn't explain why, but for the first time, he couldn't move his hand. He turned away and left the room. The priest didn't call after him. He simply said, "When they ask what you heard, tell them it was the truth." That night, the executioner didn't sleep. He kept hearing the priest's voice repeating, "The second God weeps." And beneath those words, another echo, softer, the same whisper he'd heard as a child in the walls of the shadow choir, the same one that had promised mercy. 3 days later, the priest was found dead. Not executed, not murdered, broken. Tongue torn out, ears shattered. The Vatican called it a miracle, the devil consuming himself. But the executioner knew better. He didn't need to ask who had done it. He'd seen their work before. When he returned to Canticum Umbrae, the masters were waiting. His robes were stripped, his mask removed, and his name spoken for the last time. Not in prayer, but in judgment. He stood in the circle of torches while the highest priest read from a scroll. Each sentence was a wound: disobedience, corruption, heresy. When it was finished, 2 guards held him by the arms. The priest reached out and slid the silver ring from his finger. "This hand no longer belongs to God," he said. Then he crushed the ring beneath his heel. The sound was small, but it carried through the chamber like a bell. With that, his service ended. He was no longer the Vatican's blade. He was a ghost that still breathed. They didn't kill him. That would have given his life meaning. Instead, they excommunicated him without death, the worst punishment in their order. No record, no burial, no prayer. The men who had trained beside him would never speak his name again. To them, he was a sin that had been undone. They beat him until he stopped moving and left him at the gates of the city. Rain fell through the torchlight, washing the blood from his face as the doors closed behind him. He lay there for hours, listening to the bells toll for others, and realized he had become what he once destroyed, a man without absolution. In the weeks that followed, he wandered through Rome like a shadow among saints. He slept beneath the bridges near the river where pilgrims threw coins for blessings. No one dared look at him for long. His eyes still carried the calm of someone who'd seen judgment up close. Sometimes he heard footsteps behind him, light, careful, familiar. He'd turn, and the street would be empty. Only the sound of dripping water remained. He knew the Vatican watched its mistakes. They always did. So he disappeared, slipped through alleyways and catacombs, living among the forgotten and the condemned. Each night he whispered the same line before sleep: "Forgive me, not for what I did, but for what I believed." He wandered Rome for years. No robe, no name, only a hood and the silence that once served him. People passed without seeing. Children crossed themselves when he walked by. To the world, he was a beggar. To the Vatican, a ghost. One night he found a boy sleeping on the steps of a ruined chapel, barefoot, hungry. He took the boy in, taught him to listen, not speak, to watch, not beg. For a time the silence felt almost kind. Then one morning, the boy was gone. On the stone where he had slept lay a single white flower, the kind that only grew inside the Vatican gardens. He didn't try to find him. He already knew. Years passed. He grew older, slower, but the silence never left. One night, he heard footsteps in the catacombs, measured, careful, familiar. He waited. A figure stepped from the dark, hooded, masked, black robes glinting in candlelight. The blade was Vatican steel. The walk was familiar. He didn't ask who sent him. He already knew. The boy stopped a few paces away. Neither spoke. The old man lowered his head, not in fear, but in mercy. As the blade lifted, something slipped from the young man's hand, a silver ring rolling across the stone floor. The candlelight caught the engraving. Obadiah, obey. The old executioner almost smiled. When it was over, the catacombs fell silent. In Rome, the bells began to ring, and somewhere deep beneath the Vatican, another voice whispered the only law that ever mattered. Obadiah, obey.